All right, so we finished Macbeth, and I wanted to go back and kind of talk about the witches' prophecies and how they were kind of true, but also not, and really what that means and what happened, just so we're all on the same page before we move on to after the book festivities and stuff like that. So we're going to take a look at the prophecies, what they meant, what happened, and we'll go from there. So what happens? Well, after seeing Banquo's ghost at the dinner, Macbeth decides to go back to the witches so they can tell him what is going to happen. He's worried, he's paranoid, so he wants some information about what's going to happen to try and put his mind at ease. Macbeth is able to find the witches, and they give him an additional 3 prophecies or predictions, and they are each accompanied by an apparition, which is just simply an image in their cauldron. Okay, so they show Macbeth a picture in the cauldron, and then they say a little something about the prophecy. So what are those 3 prophecies? Well, first, the cauldron shows an image of an armored helmet, so kind of like a warrior, and they say, "Beware Macduff, beware the Thane of Fife." The next one is the image of a bloody child, so like a baby, basically, and they say, "For none of woman born shall harm Macbeth." All right, that is the important part of the second prophecy. The third is an image of a crowned child holding a tree. All right, and what they say here is Macbeth shall never be vanquished or defeated until great Birnam wood to hide Dunsinane hill shall come against him. So we'll talk about what these 3 things mean, and really what happened. We know what happens at the end of the book. Macbeth is defeated. So were these predictions incorrect, or were they right? And the simple answer is kind of both. So let's take a look at this. So the first prophecy on Macduff. The witches tell Macbeth to beware Macduff. Macbeth kind of dismisses this right away. He goes, "Yeah, I know Macduff didn't come to dinner. I mean, I'm suspicious of him. Basically, you've confirmed what I already know, that I can't trust him, that I need to be watching out for him." We do know, having read the rest of the play, that Macduff ends up killing Macbeth, so the witches were right, but Macbeth did not listen to them because of his belief in one of the other prophecies. So they were right, but Macbeth didn't really listen to this one because of what they say next, which is, "None of women born shall harm Macbeth." All right? And so this one is always the most complicated for students to understand, because this is kind of like an old time terminology. But when Macbeth hears none of women born are going to harm him, he basically thinks that no person is going to be able to kill him because everyone has a mother. So if everyone is woman born and no one that is woman born can harm Macbeth, Macbeth thinks he's invincible, okay? No person is going to kill him. They can't, according to the prophecy. Except that's not what the witches intended for that to mean, okay? We'll get to that term in a little bit. But the distinction here is that the witches are talking about a person who was born by C-section. So if you're woman born, you're pushed out of the birthing canal, okay? You are birthed, you are born, all right? If you're not woman born, you still have a mom, but you were born by C-section, all right? So it's kind of a play on words here. Macbeth clearly misinterprets this one. He thinks, okay, well, everyone has a mom, so I'm good. No one's going to hurt me. But the witches mean you need to watch out for someone who's been born by C-section. So a lot of students kind of miss this, and then when Macbeth dies, they're like, what? So they were wrong. No, they were right, and Macbeth was wrong. He misinterpreted what they meant. So since Macduff was born by C-section, he was untimely ripped from his mother's womb. That is the quote. That means he was born by C-section. He wasn't born naturally, or traditionally. So he was born by surgery, essentially. All right? So Macduff is not woman born and kills Macbeth. Macbeth doesn't fear this. Even though they said to watch out for Macduff, he doesn't fear this because he assumes that every person is woman born. And then our third prophecy is about the Birnam Wood, all right? And so Macbeth will not be defeated until Birnam Wood goes to Dunstane Hill. This also is one that is kind of misinterpreted by students sometimes as well. Birnam Wood is just the name of a forest, okay? So just think of a literal forest in the ground, a landmark, all right? The hill is another landmark. In this case, it's just a literal hill by Macbeth's castle, all right? So two physical landmarks that you can see, and they're huge, all right? They're nature. Macbeth thinks that he is going to be king forever because it is impossible for a literal forest to just like sprout up off of the ground and walk over to the hill. These things were not close to each other. So he thinks he's good. Once again, that's impossible. I'm invincible. I'm going to reign forever. Thanks, witches. But in reality, what happened, the soldiers that went to storm Macbeth's castle, they cut down branches from the forest and they used them as camouflage. Like they walked with those branches in front of them so they couldn't be seen until they got close. And then they arrived at the hill. So the prophecy is technically true. Macbeth was vanquished after the wood came to the hill. Those branches, those soldiers brought the branches there. So Macbeth misinterpreted the meaning behind the witch's third prophecy as well. All right. So once again, the witches were right. Macbeth was wrong. He just did not properly understand them. So the term that we use to sum this up is the witches were being ambiguous. They were being intentionally vague. They chose their words carefully, and they meant to be vague to allow Macbeth to maybe misunderstand, all right? So they kind of wanted him to misunderstand. They wanted to give him a false sense of security. They think he's wicked. They don't think he's a good person, a good leader, so they wanted to mislead him. He interprets everything as, I'm going to be okay, this can't happen, and they actually mean something the exact opposite. So their words are not lies. They tell the truth, but Macbeth misunderstands what their words mean. There's multiple meanings in play, and he chose the wrong one. So my favorite example of something that's ambiguous is this picture, all right? Some people see a duck, so you can see like the beak over here, the eye, and then this is the rest of the head. And then other people see a rabbit, all right? So these are the two ears, this is the eye, this is the front of the face with the little nose and mouth over here. So it's ambiguous, it's vague. There's really not, it's hard to tell like which is which. There's a case to be made for both. But you can't quite tell until you know later on, okay? So it's vague, there's different ways to interpret it. That's what happened to Macbeth, based off what he was thinking on the witch's prophecies. So this is why Macbeth meets his fate in the end. He does not interpret the messages of the prophecy in the same way that the witches intended. Macbeth believes the messages because the witches were right the first time. He did become king after all. But they're witches, right? They're tricky characters. They're not straightforward. So they weren't completely truthful, even though they did not technically lie. So as a result, Macbeth gets a false sense of security because of his interpretation of the prophecies and believes he will be invincible, he will not be defeated, even up until the very end when he is about to fight Macduff. The actual meanings behind these prophecies were true, and the prophecies were fulfilled. All these things happened, even though they originally seemed impossible to Macbeth based on how he understood these messages. So just to wrap things up, after all these messages from the prophecies came true, Macbeth duels with Macduff, and Macduff, being not woman-born, kills Macbeth, and Malcolm becomes king. He is cleared of any wrongdoing in Duncan's death, and he is given the crown that he has rightfully earned. So that is the end of the play, and that is how we get there. I just wanted to cover this, like I said, because many students don't quite grasp the ambiguity, the differences in the meaning of what happens in the actual story and how Macbeth interprets those prophecies. So thanks for watching. Hopefully that cleared it up. If you still have questions about the end of the play or the prophecies themselves, definitely ask your teacher. But otherwise, congrats on finishing the book and keep up the good work.